say that, see, the thing about Rahu Ketu is that they both are representing both of our issues as well as how to resolve the issue. And the key factor in any chart reading, and that doesn't matter whether it's Vedic or Western, is that when you see your chart, don't get depressed by it. Think, what are you going to do about it? Because all of us have issues. And I have never seen a bad chart, I've seen bad use of a chart. So it's just like you can have a most expensive car and you can crash it and mess it up, or you can have a kind of a boring car, but you know how to drive it and you do a great job with it. So the whole idea about the chart is to work with whatever is given to you. And you can do it 100% or you can do it 5%. Mostly we work halfway through, but that's what I've understood. I've been teaching and doing Jyotish. I started learning in 79. But I was professionally, I've been working, it's 20 years now, so as a full-time astrologer. But that's the main thing. So with the nodes, they are the ones that can really mess us up if we don't understand the energy. And specifically Rahu, it is about dissatisfaction, and Ketu is about rejection. Two issues that we deal a lot with. So I'm going to talk now, the second half of the workshop, I'm going to talk about the myth of Rahu Ketu. And so the myth of Rahu Ketu is connected to the churning of the ocean of milk. So it's the myth of creation. In Vedic knowledge, there is a myth of creation. And the churning of the milk, you can see here, we have this mountain and this milk, and gods are pulling one side, demons are pulling the other side. This is very much part of our life, our good, gods are our good habits and demons are our bad habits. And they're pulling us both ways, and that's really the aspect of the nodal energy. So the main myth of Rahu Ketu is connected to Samudra Manthan. Samudra means the ocean, Manthan means churning. It relates to the time when the gods and demons got together to churn the ocean of milk. So there was a time when the earth was plunged into darkness, the moon had disappeared, and the world was in chaos. You see, and the demons were misbehaving, and demons had become extra strong and had defeated the gods. So in the story of the gods and demons, which is a war from time immemorial, the demons are always shown as huge, muscled, very tall and big, and the gods are little tiny, very beautifully formed but small. And if you think about, and the demons know all the tricks in the book, including doing all the mantras and chanting and eating the right food and going to the gym all the time to become very strong. So they're in all the mythology, the demons are always winning, and then the gods are trying to find strategy of how to defeat them. And basically it's about our own life, that our good qualities are much more harder to develop. They are much smaller, and whereas the negative qualities, they are big and strong, and they and Moon had also, because he had so many wives and he was not being partial to them, he got cursed, so he died. So there was no light at all at night. So night time, all the negative energy started dominating. So so Brihaspati, which is Jupiter, advised the gods that instead of fighting, the gods should take the help of the demons to churn the ocean to find Amrita, the nectar of immortality. In some myths, Vishnu considered to have given the advice, so they used the Mount Mandara as the rod. Kurma, tortoise, became the base. Naga Vasuki, the rope. The demons and the gods pulled either side. And finally, Lakshmi emerged from this myth. So here we have a picture of Brihaspati, which is Jupiter. So the idea is that the Jupiter is the guru. So the guru said, don't fight with the demons, make use of them. So if you want to find something special, you can't find it by ignoring the demons or fighting with them. You have to make use of them so that you can find the nectar. So here we have Vishnu as Kurma avatar. And Kurma avatar is Vishnu incarnation for Saturn. So he became the base on which the mountain was. And this is the snake. So the snake was used as the rope. And Vasuki. So what happened that when the gods and demons were pulling churning the ocean, because remember it's a huge ocean, so they're churning it. So Vasuki got very agitated by it, and because he was being pulled in different directions, and he started sprouting poison. So the ocean of milk was getting polluted, and the gods requested Lord Shiva for help. And here we see is a beautiful picture that Lord Shiva came and drank the poison. This is why Shiva is always worshipped for taking away negativity. Because if Shiva had not drunk the poison, then the ocean of milk would have got polluted, and our whole journey of finding enlightenment would not have happened. So he's the one, and this is also very true that when we start any new process of purification, the first thing that comes out is toxins. Just like if you're having a day of diet, just fruit diet, you get a headache. Similarly, when you start doing see, when the phone rings, they say Jupiter's calling. Because the sound is represented by Jupiter, so it's like. So Shiva, by drinking the poison, he avoided. So therefore, when you are, he allowed the churning to go on. So what this suggests is that when you are starting any new spiritual purification practice, the first thing comes is agitation. I've seen this very often when you go to a yoga retreat or something, or some spiritual thing. Sometimes people get so agitated and troubled because they have to pass that doorway. So they need a Shiva type of personality or figure, somebody who protects them. It's not necessarily everybody wants to chant to Shiva, but why we chant to Shiva is for this reason, because he protects that journey so that the poisons don't get accumulated. So after this, the churning continues, and then 14 gemstones come out of the churning. And out of which 2 very important gemstones, one is they're called ratnas, they're not gemstones. Ratna means something, it's like a gem, but not necessarily a physical gem. And one important thing is Goddess Lakshmi. She came out of this churning. So Lakshmi is considered the goddess of auspiciousness. And then Dhanvantari, the god of Ayurveda. So they are the 2 very important things, that Dhanvantari, and there were a lot of herbs and very special things that came out of the churning. That means that as we begin the process of purification, after the poisons, we get a lot of good stuff, but there were also a lot of negative stuff that came out. But the good stuff with the Lakshmi, so here I have Goddess Lakshmi, and you can see underneath this photograph is the churning is taking place. And one very important thing about this churning and the emergence of Goddess Lakshmi is that her celebration is coming in the next few days. And that is, in India we celebrate the Festival of Light, and we do the prayer to Goddess Lakshmi. And her birthday is considered at this time. And also Dhanvantari. And their special day is called Dhanteras. Dhan means Dhanvantari is the god of Ayurveda. So, in a way of how to heal ourselves, how do we heal ourselves through the science of life, which Dhanvantari came and he brought this little pot with him. You see, even Lakshmi is carrying the pot, and Dhanvantari is also carrying the pot. So, he brings the pot, and people celebrate this special day by in India there's a lot of elaborate ritual that goes on with all the things. So um, and this is on this year it's on 9th of November, Dhanteras, and so it's both the birth of Dhanvantari and Lakshmi, so they both come together. So some people only pray for wealth because they want Lakshmi, just money coming, but it's about auspiciousness, about that feeling. So they are both come out of the churning of the oceans. And then what happens is that when they find Amrita, the gods realize that they must keep it for themselves because Amrita is nectar of immortality. They felt that if the demons get it, then the demons will use it for personal enhancement and they will become immortal. So our negative qualities will be perpetually immortal and there's nothing we can do, we can't kill them. So this fight over Amrita took place, they say thousands of years. So there are some very nice pictures of, I don't have them, but of the gods and demons chasing each other around the universe. And during that time, in 4 different places, Amrita is supposed to have fallen in India. And one of the times it fell was when Jupiter was in Leo. So Vedically, Jupiter is now in Leo. So this year is the celebration of the Amrita falling with Jupiter in Leo. It's a very auspicious year this year because the nectar fell. And areas Nasik and Kumbakonam. And Kumbakonam is where a priest this morning comes from. So that is called the Aquarius town. So the nectar falls in the 4 fixed signs of Jupiter. So the gods and demons are chasing each other, and this is sidereal fixed signs. So Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius. And in 4 corners of India, this festival takes place by sacred rivers. So you have heard of Kumbh Mela, which takes place when moon is in Jupiter is in Taurus. So millions of people come there. You may have seen it on TV. There's a lot of programs on it. So that's celebrating this event. And even now it's celebrated as if it was like thousands of years ago. And so now this Jupiter in Leo is a very special time because the nectar has fallen and then all year round the celebration takes place. So, so they followed the long fight that the Amritas, demons chasing the gods around the world wanting the Amrita. The story is told as part of Kumbh Mela myth. So that's what the Kumbh Mela is taking place now. This is known as half Kumbh because it's Aquarius is the full Kumbh and half, and then you have kind of 4 Kumbh Mela in 12-year cycle. So there's and 4 drops of this Amrita fell at sacred places where Kumbh Mela is celebrated. And so then, in order to resolve this, they decided that the only way to distract the demons is to throw a party. So Vishnu took the form of Mohini, the enchantress, and became in charge of giving out the Amrita. So Vishnu, this is the only female incarnation of Vishnu. So he takes this form of this beautiful woman, and Mohini gave the Amrita to the gods, but ignored the demons. They were plied with other demons with wine, women, and song to distract their attention. So here we have a picture of Vishnu as Mohini. In fact, if you do classical dance, there's a very beautiful dance that is done, Bharatnatyam, on this story. And so you see the gods and the demons are sitting either side, and she kind of distracts them and only gives the gods. And so one of the demon called Swarbhanu, he secretly drank the pot of Amrita, from the pot of Amrita. And sun and moon gods saw him do it and told Vishnu about it. So therefore, as Mohini, what Vishnu did was he threw his chakra at the demon. Uh, so this is the picture, and here you see Mohini and the demon's head getting cut off. And now what you see is that uh, because Rahu became the head and got the body is the head and got the body of the snake. There's a mistake here. And Ketu has the head of the snake with the human body. As they drank the Amrita, they are immortal and great enemies of the sun and moon. So you see this cutting of the head. So we have the one energy, but it's got two parts to it. It's the same person, so we have the head and the body. And so the myth of the churning of the oceans in the allegory to life, without the help of Swarbhanu and the demons, the gods could not have found Amrita, the secret of immortality. In the same way, we as humans cannot find our higher self without understanding the lessons of Rahu and Ketu, or without understanding the lessons of what are the demonic energies that chase us. You know, what is our weaknesses? If we don't understand our weaknesses, we can't find our strength. If we think everything is fine, we are all perfect, we can't find it. So you see, the whole thing that what Brihaspati or the Guru advised was that we must understand our demonic forces and we must use them without making them stronger. Our inner emotions are like the ocean being churned. Within this ocean are treasures, but also poisons and dangers. We have to learn to distinguish the precious from the dross. And finally find Amrita, the nectar of immortality or true happiness. So you see, in order to understand, and this is really about understanding our chart, at this stage doesn't matter whether it's Vedic or Western. It's about understanding what is the right source of energy for us and what is the difficult source. Not just in our natal chart, but what is happening by transits, what's happening by your progress chart, by our dasha system, whatever it is. But understanding how to work with it. So you see, the churning is taking place daily because the push and pull effect is happening all the time. And the conflict is between our attachment to materialistic achievements, the domain of Rahu, and the liberation of the soul through eternal bliss and tranquility, and Ketu is the moksha karaka. You see, so the same story of the nodal axis is telling you the story of desire and of enlightenment. And as we begin the churning to find our spirituality and our inner self, the first thing that comes is the poison, and we need to deal with them in order to progress. Many of us give up at the first stage. You know, because when the poisons come, and poison may also come in the point of people telling you, what are you doing? I tell you, I get more discriminated because of being an astrologer or doing spiritual stuff than for any other reason, because people think they can just kind of say anything to you, and I'm sure you all face that. But a lot of times people, I know with astrology, suddenly people look at their chart and they find, oh, they have a moon Rahu conjunction or they have debilitated planets, and that's it. They don't want to progress further because they don't know what's the next step. But even in spirituality, in yoga, you see people, it releases toxins first. So you need somebody wise enough to help you cope through that first step. That is why the ancients have always said, don't do it alone. You need to have a guru, somebody who's guiding you in the path, you know. As this spiritual center, you know, you're learning under very good circumstances. You're in the perfect energy. So you're getting some kind of blessing of knowledge. You know, even knowledge can be toxic because you suddenly find you've got something negative within you. And then that traumatizes you. Whereas it's not meant to traumatize. But that is the first step. That's where the Shiva energy. So you have to have somebody who's there protecting you, who has the energy to take the poison away. So it's not necessarily literally the poison, but this is why people pray to Shiva to protect them from toxins of life. I was noticing that at the tea house today they were playing the main Shiva mantra, Om Triambakam. That is the mantra for this, to protect you from, you know, fear and anxiety and fear of death and difficulties. So, you know, the chanting is very important as part of your protection. So, and so often also we hear that from the students that the demonic property can take you over. You know, the energy, the negative energy sometimes can take you over. And clients and students tell me that of a time that they are not themselves, like a different force has taken them over. It's almost like, you know, like some energy takes you over. So you can call it subconscious. You can just you react to a situation. You have cornered yourself in a situation. And all of us may have experienced it at some time or not. The difference of a mature soul is that they know how to get themselves back from the situation. You know, they always describe the difference between gods and demons is that the gods know how to atone for a mistake immediately. So they know they've made a mistake and they say sorry. Or they do something like in the story of Lord Rama, he kills the demon Ravana. Even though he kills the demon, he still knows he made a mistake because he killed somebody. So he builds a temple, Rameshwaram, in honor of Lord Shiva to atone his energy. So he didn't wait for many lifetimes, he did it immediately. Whereas we as humans, we will sometimes keep on thinking about our mistakes and not atone them. The demons may never atone them because they don't even recognize they need to atone. We as humans, we are kind of going between the two aspects. So it is there sometimes that these demons and Rahu Ketu can take over, so we have to be careful. So Rahu Ketu together form the karmic axis of life, but they have distinct individual features that mustn't be lost when working with them. So we have to understand that there's a Rahu and there's a Ketu. There's a north node and a south node. But in Vedic is better Rahu Ketu, they have their features. And Rahu is the projection of past life issues today. Keeping with the shadowy nature, this projection is in the mind. Rahu becomes obsessed with externalizing past life wishes through present experiences. One of the things about Rahu is because of the shadowy nature, sometimes we don't know we are doing that. We are kind of, it's like compulsive action. That we got to do this, we have to do this because we don't know. And he can also keep many things hidden. It's not always like that you understand. It's like in a secret world. So it's not exposed to you. And most interpretations of Rahu only show the negative side of Rahu. But this is only seeing half the picture. Rahu on its own, without due knowledge of its power, is usually perceived as destructive force. But it's just like anything. If we take the analogy of a car, if we know how to drive it, we are perfectly fine. But car is a negative force. So if you just drive without any training on it, you can crash and kill people and do all sorts of things. So Rahu needs to be understood. But often in India, Rahu is only negative. So we have to understand its true power. There was a very good author who wrote a book on nodes called Bipin Bihari. And he wrote a very good book, but I think 30-40 years ago. Now he was the first person who brought out a more positive view of the nodes. In Western astrology, they're usually only positive, or at least the north node, but we have to see the shadowy nature of it. Rahu's energy needs to be trained and disciplined. Then it has the capacity to defy gravity, convention, make immense changes to individual psyche. You see, Rahu, always you have to think about discipline. Always, I can't do everything I want. Let me control it. Let me say no to some things. You know, I like here you have 3 classes going on at the same time. So many things, but maybe you can't take everything. So you have to say, okay, I can only do one thing. Not feel dissatisfied about it because it's just part of life. You can't do everything. So with Rahu specifically, you have to be conscious and always disciplined. Means yourself, you have to learn concept of discipline. While you're studying Rahu, always remember its negativity as well as its great occult powers. So there's both pure and impure, living side by side without any boundaries. So it's not like you can know that. They're both kind of in that package. The darkness of Rahu shows the cosmic disturbance in the inner being through rulership of nakshatra, any close conjunctions in the chart. If you have any conjunction with Rahu or Ketu, but we just talk about Rahu, it means that planet is on the ecliptic. I think Naomi is going to talk about the declination. But you see, when a planet is on the ecliptic, it's on that knocking on heaven's door. There's a song, you know, it's knocking there. So it's right on that ecliptic. If you have a Rahu conjunction, or you have Rahu on your ascendant, means your ascendant is right on that ecliptic. But that energy is like a snake sitting on front of it. So you have to know what to do with the snake before you can go into that ecliptic. And the sun and moon, the intersection where that conjunction is, that exact intersection between the lunar and the solar path. So it's the path of the soul. So any close conjunction with Rahu Ketu, it means that if you can learn how to deal with Rahu or Ketu, you are privy to some secret knowledge. And that's why they're so important in occult signification. And today I showed you a picture right at the beginning. I'll show it again. That's of Patanjali. And do you know who Patanjali is? Patanjali is who wrote the Yoga Sutras. And he's body of a snake. Often people mistake him for Rahu. He's born. He was a snake born, and he has the body of a snake and a head of. So he's connected to the nodes, and he's connected to secret knowledge as well. So Rahu is a cosmic power that can consume your whole being if you allow it to go there. It can create issues so dark and troubled that it's difficult to let go of. So that's in extreme cases. You know people, drug addiction, emotional addiction, relationship addiction, any kind of thing where you have totally got out of balance. That's the thing that is there. So we have to know that if we are looking at charts, we meet all types of people. And Rahu is usually responsible for addictive personalities because his urge is to consume everything. So a lot of things with addictive personalities, they can't stop themselves from consumption. And the light of Rahu represents the transcending all your darkness, laying to bed your demons, and find the special place we surrender to our higher self. And that is the place of a self-realized soul. So you see sometimes charts of great sages, and they don't seem any different from you and I. You look at somebody and say, how come he's a sage and I'm not? And the main difference is that they know how to use these energies. It's not that they still have to live the worldly life or things, but they know how to, they have got some way to deal with it. One of the great examples is the chart of Swami Shivananda of the Divine Life Society. He has Saturn, Mars and Rahu in his ascendant. But he has written 300 books. He's a great teacher. His students were great as well. He has so many great students, Swami Chinmayananda, Vishnu Devananda, the Shivananda Yoga Centers, all that. Because he understood the play. So, this aspect of the light of Rahu, which is that special light you see at the time of eclipse. So, understanding Rahu has never easy. It has the ability to obscure everything, giving you altered sense of reality, what you think is right, whereas what others may consider it negative. So, that energy, once it takes over, that's why you have to discipline it from the beginning. You don't say, okay, let me compromise a bit. Then suddenly you find he's taken you over. And and the other thing about Rahu is that he's only half the story. I find this is the most important thing, because Rahu Ketu are split into two. Each one doesn't represent the full story. So he thinks he knows everything, but he only knows the head part of it. He doesn't know the body part of it. And because he has only the head, he is not able to digest anything. That is the key aspect of Rahu that you have to understand. He can eat everything, but I am not full because I haven't digested it. So here we have a very nice picture of Rahu. One of the things I like to do is I like to collect the pictures. And one very good source you can find is you just Google images and put Rahu there. And you have endless pictures. And you can download them and keep them. Wikipedia, this is from Wikipedia. And so you see he's very militant looking. his description. Another aspect of Rahu Ketu is that nobody loves him. So it's a part of, we as astrologers, we have some Rahu Ketu, because gods mistrust them because they're not gods, but the demons also don't like them because they've become gods. So they're demonic gods, but they are the gods think they're demonic and the demons think they're gods. So they have got this outsider energy. So very much, that feeling of, especially with Rahu, you feel very much the outsider. Those of you who have Rahu in the ascendant, you don't, or you have it in the, with moon or sun, you feel people don't understand you. Because you don't, neither side understands. I always identify with this because when I go to India, people think I'm strange. When I'm outside, I am strange. Because I live abroad, so I'm different. And then I go back to India, I'm different there also. But I don't have a problem with that because I have a good Rahu. But the point is this, that sometimes you see that people are looking at you and you think why they think you're different, because you don't fit in. And this is very much about, even with astrology you find, or spirituality when you go there, but astrology you find.